We will be talking this morning in broad terms and some extent to some specifics about energy mix. And how do we get there? What should it be? We'll be talking about practical things that we could do or we are doing to ensure that we stay on track and avoid energy poverty. We will also be talking about how do we attract finance to these things that we need to do to make sure that we keep the lights on, we keep industrialization going, and we keep Nigeria and indeed Africa where it should be in the marketplace. And towards the end, we'll find time to talk a little bit more about diversity and what that means to the bigger picture. So without further ado, I'll go to you, Michelle. We've talked about this. I wanted to get your perspective on the energy mix. There's been quite a lot of changes since we started talking about the world need to reframe its dependency on a certain type of energy source. So where do you think we are? Where do you think Nigeria should be? How do we get there?
So thank you. And at Chevron, we believe that reliable, affordable, ever cleaner energy is it's the foundation of any economy. It drives human progress. It drives the economy itself. It sets the standard of living for all people. And yes, the energy system is evolving. We can see it evolving. And it needs to evolve in order to meet the needs of the changing world. And while we believe that the future is lower carbon, we still believe that oil and gas are a viable component within the energy mix. You have to have all forms. And in order to go ahead and build a strategy around this, you need a strategy that's going to take you into decades, starting with our existing set of resources and moving forward into lower carbon. And when I look at some of the key strategies that any company needs to have in place as they're thinking through the energy mix and thinking about how they're going to be growing their portfolio, it's got to start with people. And it's people and leadership. Innovation is kind of the cornerstone to all of this. It's technology, both technology to drive our existing assets, as well as technology to look at new lower carbon businesses. It's a lower carbon strategy, and I think it needs to be twofold. If oil and gas are going to remain part of the energy mix, you've got to look at how we're going to lower the carbon intensity of our current footprint, but then also how are you going to develop, deploy, and implement technology that brings you into that lower carbon future. Lastly, it's going to be about partnership and your ability to have a competitive portfolio. It has to be a portfolio. It can't just be oil, just be gas. It needs to be oil, gas, lower carbon. It's an energy system. And the partnership is going to be critical because no company can do it on their own. It's a partnership between the federal government of Nigeria, our partners in the assets, NNPCL for us, our other partners, and our business partners, because it's going to take all of us together with the human energy to deploy the technology that's going to help us progress into that future.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was quite insightful. And you opened up a few sub-themes that we really have to delve into. You talk about partnership and portfolio. You talk about technology. So obviously, from a spectrum of the industry, the producers, especially the IOCs, understood that the energy mix needs to change. There's been some strategy changes. The portfolio is being restructured. Business focus is being given to other areas. And it's keen, you said, it's technology, right? Technology is the backbone of that and getting there. So I'm going to go to you, Rosario, in your role as the leader of the Association of Technology Leaders or Technology Providers in the country. What is your perspective on that with respect to maybe you and your members' contribution to the aspiration of the IOCs and the independents as well?
Okay, thanks, Dayo. I think Michelle has set a very good tone for the conversation. 100% aligned with her views around what we must do. with net zero set at 2060 for Nigeria. I believe that a mix in the portfolio is what is required for us to be sustainable and for us to get to that target that we desire. From a technology perspective, our member companies in the Petroleum Contractors Trade section are also well positioned to continue to innovate, aligned with the changing dynamics in the landscape of energy. I wouldn't go into the details of the technology. We have a wide array of technologies across the value chain, from SLB to Halliburton to Technip FMC to Tenaris, and all these companies. But I'd like to take it more on a macro level. And I believe that supporting Michelle's point on the need to harness our current resources, obviously the traditional resources so far have not shown to be capable of, addressing the demand for energy. However, I believe that somewhat we are on the right track around the traditional sets of energy and how the government in Nigeria are addressing a viewpoint on going forward with the view on gas. The decade of gas has been declared. There's now a state of emergency in the country that has been declared in the oil and gas industry. Yesterday I was here and the GCEO of NNPC also reiterated this state of emergency. And the idea is that we must continue to harness our oil and gas resources. There are other focuses as well that I have seen, which probably is in the right direction around net zero targets and resolving all the bottlenecks, in addressing or harnessing or producing the current fossil resources that we have as a country. A second point for me would be that while we do that, and we all agree in this room that a balance in the mix is required, we need to have a view on the renewable potential of this country. With abundance of sunlight, with abundance of, all the natural God-given resources that we have, I believe that as we focus on the traditional fossil resources and harness those, we also have to have a long-term view on how we develop renewable resources. I gave a recent interview where I was highlighting the case for Angola, where Angola, raised a 50 megawatts solar farm through investments. And I think it's very exciting to see, because you can see that the future is still oil in Angola, but it's also seeming towards a balanced future, with that solar perspective that they now carry. So for me, in looking at the balance between the traditional fossil resources that we have in Nigeria, which we need to optimally tap into, and the renewable mix, we need to unblock all the issues with traditional sources. Yesterday, again, I heard the GCEO address some of the issues, which I wouldn't go into, but I see the government and the NOC, taking a concerted effort towards addressing the issues of the sector. Renewable financing or financing continues to be, a challenge, since it's major funds required. And for us in a country such as Nigeria, the sincerity of purpose has to be in place here. There are many undertones around the sincerity of our intent, which investors, I think there are willing investors around the world. And the investors, capitalists move where the money is. And so if I'm looking at that direction around how we see investors being attracted to a market such as Nigeria to pull the capital towards Nigeria, then we must begin to address all those intents around sincerity as well as consistency, so that you're not bringing in a policy, a renewable policy that is in place today, and with a change of administration, you're uncertain. It brings about stability in the economy to the extent that investors do not have the confidence required to be able to implement or go ahead to fund renewable projects. I think the last part is capacity building. Renewable is still new in the space. Technology is evolving in the traditional fossil direction. So it's important that we keep a view on developing and attracting the right talents, not just for today, but for the pipeline of the future. I'll yield at this point and come back at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's quite insightful. Thank you. You said it on a short to mid-term, we still have to harness the fossil fuel and the resources, and we just then need to build up the alternate portfolio, but all of that still requires technology and investment. And you mentioned investment with respect to investor confidence. So one of the things that everyone has said, and it's pretty obvious to everyone in this room, is that we need to attract investment. Right? So I want to go to you, Bambo, and feel free to start, with remark and to what has been said. But I would like you to kind of segue us into what do we need to do to get this finance interests into the country?
It's a great question. I had prepared a whole lot to say about the energy mix, but I think Rosaria and Michelle have covered that entire slate. But I would like to speak a little bit about our own perspective at Oando as an indigenous company. For us, we have to be optimistic. We remain optimistic. We look at all these challenges more as opportunities. And taking advantage of those opportunities is really the value that indigenous companies can bring in terms of innovation. I'll give examples of how we're looking at it. Yesterday, the Secretary General of OPEC said in his keynote that Nigeria will have almost 400 million people, projected to have almost 400 million people by 2050, which would make us the third most populous country on the planet. But every time I hear this stat quoted, it's almost quoted as a negative thing. But in truth, that would mean that the demand is there. We keep talking about how do you generate the demand. These 400 million people will need power. Nigerians, by definition, are also very resilient and resourceful. These people will be industrious. So how do we create between now and that time? Because we're not going to wake up one day and we're 350, 400 million people. It's going to grow over time. So how do we create the infrastructure, the enabling environment for these people to generate value? And like you said, I can try and segue that into attracting finance. Traditional finance or financing of projects really hasn't worked as well as it would in other climes in Nigeria. We have to be a bit more creative in what we do. Rather than having the finance be the foundation to drive the demand, I think we need to let the demand drive the finance. And what am I trying to say? I'll give an example. If, for example, we have declared the decade of gas in terms of going with the energy mix by itself is something that I believe will happen organically. The idea of net zero by the timelines that have been dictated will not work for everyone. We do have unique opportunities. We have almost 40% of the reserves on the continent, but very minimal investment. It's not proportional to the kind of reserves that we have. Our reserves to production is low. However, we know every drop of oil or molecule of gas that we produce today has a home, except for the ones that we flare, which is something that both the IOCs, the indigenous companies have taken up to the point that we've had a serious reduction even in our flares. I had wished that the Honorable Minister of Communication would be here, because there are really some synergies there that we have to look at when I say we can't look at traditional financing. For example, we look at a company like, talking about global companies now, like NVIDIA. It's been in the news a lot lately. NVIDIA has recently become a $3 trillion market cap company. 10 years ago, they were about $10 billion, which is still a lot in our environment. But the growth has been driven by AI technology effectively. What do they manufacture specifically is AI chips that go into data centers for cloud computing. What is cloud computing? There are data centers all over the world, many of them in the middle of nowhere. All you require is connectivity. In Nigeria, we're really a gas country. We have a lot of gas. We have flares, even though some of them are very small. There is absolutely nothing wrong in exploring building data centers that are minimally manned in the Niger Delta where the flares are, and then connecting them to the internet. The internet is global. Your demand for that infrastructure would be global. So we talk, and we can do this very quickly, it would be transformational. So we talk a lot about creating the demand. We need to start looking at, first of all, global demand. How can we serve that? We're going to have almost 400 million people. If they are well grounded, educated, they will create the value given the right infrastructure. And for financing, we need to start looking at the demand itself, pulling for the financing. There's many structures you can use. You can use vendor financing. There have been instances where we've spoken to like LNG developers to even go down the value chain and fund the drilling of the wells for the gas that will supply the LNG plants. And then the gas pays for the well that was drilled. And at the same time, you'll have what we're now calling associated oil, which would be an upside. Michelle said earlier that it has to be a portfolio, it has to be profitable, is what I heard from it, because we look for opportunities. And when you say something has to be profitable, it's going to be organically driven. I have a little bit more to say, but maybe I'll keep it. But I was talking about the energy mix, and I think I missed this out. We're in a unique position. If we look at the way, and this example keeps coming up, that telecoms developed in Nigeria, we had NITEL, we had landlines. It was in a lot of places, it wasn't everywhere. When we had mobile phones, we didn't go and complete deploying landlines over Nigeria before we all switched. The objective was to have the communication, which we all have now. So now we have gas power plants, we have gas lines, and we continue to build them. However, once we can really invest and ramp up our rural electrification, mini grids, things like that, we will organically get into an energy mix that works for us and will balance out for us, given that we can't leave our valuable resources in the ground.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was quite insightful. So I wasn't lying when I said I have the brightest minds sitting here with me. So this is really working. I like your. It's a unique perspective. I'd never thought about it. The collaboration side that you mentioned, and then you highlighted having the demand drive the financing. Again, it's. I think that's a really good point that needs to be expanded further. But what I'll do, Michelle, let me come back to you on that. What is your take on attracting finance for your projects, and what is Chevron doing in that area?
I'm gonna start by saying we ought to be excited. I know it's day 3 of the conference. Everybody looks very, very tired. We need to be excited. Nigeria has the resource density, right? There are resources in Nigeria, both oil and gas and energy resources, but also people resources, right? So you've got the resource. That's the first step. Without the resource, you can't get any further. I believe we've got the partnership with the federal government, with our partners, to try to find ways to make it work. We've said it a bit before, you need a safe, stable environment in order to grow these projects. They need to be competitive, you need a strong rate of return, you need a fiscally stable and commercially stable environment in order to operate. We need to bring the cost down. So now once you've got the resources down, if we can find a way to make these projects competitive, financing is kind of the next hurdle. If you look at Chevron as an example, we've got a $1.4 billion investment in what we're calling Project Panther. It's an infill program. It is externally funded. And by using an innovative externally funded mechanism, it solves a lot of problems. We don't have to worry about arrears or where's the money's coming from. All we have to do is deliver. We have to deliver, we have to execute with excellence. And I think it's through innovative financing like that that we're going to find ways to bring these projects. Again, it's got to start with the basics. You got to have the portfolio of resources. You got to have the terms and conditions to operate in a stable fiscal environment to attract the investors. But we've found ways to do it. And this Project Panther isn't our first. We have had multiple kind of goings at this infill drilling program, and we find that with the mix, we do find the investment dollars, and we have managed to be successful with it.
Thank you very much. That's really good. So let me latch in on the stable fiscal environment that you talked about. I mean, a lot has been said about, you know, every organization. It doesn't matter where you are. You look at the portfolio of opportunities, and then you risk adjust them, and it's a top grading system, right? So looking, I'm coming to you, Muyiwa. Looking at, I want to zone in maybe a little bit on gas, but feel free to speak about others. But with respect to gas and boosting gas exploration and output, or any other, can you give me an idea of what your thoughts are on the government, on working with government agencies from the private side, private sector side, and how you think, what do we need to do to improve our situation right now?
Okay, thank you very much, Akin. Yesterday...
Is that thing on?
Yes, it's working. I can hear you. Okay, so I just have to lean a little bit. I'm sure I'm the tallest here, so I have to. So everybody's gonna forgive me. Yesterday, while we were here, we lost power for 2-3 minutes, and it became an issue in the podium here. Gas to power is just something we've been discussing over time, and if you look at it from a business perspective and the government perspective, the businessman relies on the government to make the proper legislation. She said something earlier about our nation being sincere to ourselves. We need to be sincere, we need to be purposeful, and we need to have the right intentions. We need to speak to ourselves. Are we ready to develop this gas business? Are we ready to integrate Ajaokuta steel back into the country? Are we ready to build high-pressure pipelines across the country? Are we ready to build CNG plants across the country? We don't just have to, come here all the time, speak, debate, deliberate, write down, and at the end of the day, we clink our glasses at dinner and we come again next year. So for me, gas to power is the future, and like she earlier said, net zero 2060, is it achievable? Yes. But we must support it with our intentions. We must support it with the right legislation. We don't want to wake up the next morning and the Senate is changing the law. I was somewhere in London. I think I shared that with you earlier. And the first thing about Nigeria is extremely rich in gas, energy, wind, solar, everywhere. We are extremely rich. We have the brightest mind in this country. We have a young generation. We have everything, name it. But why are we not getting it right? I listened to one professor's call. He said the World Bank will not give Nigeria tax carbon credit. But the World Bank is powered by PepsiCo. PepsiCo's 95% of the power generated by PepsiCo is from nuclear, coal, and gas. But we are not allowed to harness our coal. We are not allowed to do that. We are not allowed to build coal plants. So for me, I think we have to be sincere. And honestly, we also have to train the young ones coming up. A lot of our experts are, going to retire shortly, and we have to have the right skill to ensure that these people can take over this department, this business, the willingness to net zero by 2060. And honestly, drive down costs, driving on innovation, driving on creativity, driving on a lot of things. Bambo spoke earlier about technology. Technology is it. Pre-COVID, we were used to going to the office. Post-COVID, everyone works from home. Do you understand? So we need to get used to technology. We need to invest in technology. And we need to also drive demand for investment. How? Legislation, the right mindset, creating an enabling environment that will allow your marginal field operators, your NOCs, IPP GMDs, chairman spoke here yesterday passionately about investment. We need to encourage these guys to come into the country and do the right things. For me, for example, NOG or AG, whatever you call it, you have to allow these EMP companies float it for a while, 2 years max, minimum. Let them float NOG. Let them do it at their pace. If they drive value back to you, the right value will come back into the country. And by extension, we will invest in our infrastructure. We would upgrade the country. We would upgrade every sector of the economy. I have a whole lot to say, but I spoke earlier in a conference in London, and I said, I'm too passionate about Nigeria. I can't leave Nigeria. I'm extremely passionate about Nigeria. I'm extremely passionate about the oil and gas. I'm extremely passionate about power. I'm extremely passionate about every part of the country. Yesterday, the first Manufacturing Association of Nigeria held their meetings yesterday, and Dangote said one thing. If we continue to rely on 5,000 megawatts, 4,900 megawatts, band A, band B, band C, man, it's crazy. There's a research that says an average Nigerian has 150 kilowatts access per year. A refrigerator in Washington, D.C. uses 450 kilowatts per year. Yeah. Then imagine a human being to refrigerator, 450 minus 150, 300, gap. And the investment is there. If we have 20 million, 14 million generator in this country, that means the people are willing to pay for power. Because you have a generator, you've got to power it by diesel, by gas, by CNG, as it were, and by PMS, to power it. That means the people are interested and they are willing to pay. So let's develop the gas sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mwiwa. I mean, you made your point in interesting ways, but I mean, good point about the energy access of Nigerians in the midst of untapped resources, and we absolutely need to latch onto gas for power, domestic power, transportation, and industrialization. So it's a very good point. You also mentioned, I think briefly, because I'm going to have to come back to you on that, so start making your notes about the young people. Yeah, because you're tall enough to be able to see them from where you are. Right. But before we get into that, and we've touched on quite a number of things. I don't want us to lose focus, but I want us to, because there are quite some good points that's been raised, and maybe some of them have to be delved into afterwards. But I want to move to something that I know is important to a number of people on this panel, which is diversity. From the gender standpoint, from the age inclusion, we old people are getting excluded now. We have to take selfies just to feel among. But there's a lot to be said about diversity. There's a lot to, I wanted to hear your perspective, Rosario, because I know you love this topic, and I will not let it go without you saying something about it. What what do we stand to gain and what do we stand to lose by not paying attention to diversity?
Thank you, Tayo. What's not to love about this topic? I would always say on this stage that I'll be doing my gender a disservice if I don't talk about this topic, right? So yes, it's a very important topic to me. It should be an important topic for every single one of us in this room. Nobody excluded from the bucket. Yes, but you bring a play that looks at gender and age.
And other things.
And other things. Inclusion in general. I believe as an industry, obviously we need to continue to envision strategies that allow us build inclusivity in our workplaces or in our establishments in general. On the basic level, it would always be, okay, promote gender equality from a standpoint of policy direction. Up till now, I know there's a national gender policy in Nigeria. I'm not sure how effective it is at the moment. But I believe that it starts with defining those gender policies that enable equal pay, for instance, maternity leave, another example, and generally all anti-discriminatory practices. So that eventually, you talked about a paradigm shift or a cultural aspect that we need to bear in mind. Because traditionally, the workplace had always been perceived to be in favor of men, not by any doing of anybody. Generally speaking, women had the traditional roles in African context of being the home boards and taking care of the home front. And then the men had the responsibility of going out and coming back in and ensuring that there's food on the table. So this is our natural instinct, right? But if we have to have that paradigm shift, the government has to enable it from a policy direction, but there also has to be an awareness that is created at all levels. All levels, I mean, at the government level, at private entity levels, and even at the community level, so that people begin to understand that you harness the potential of a country or a continent by ensuring that every voice is heard and every voice is brought to the table. I like to give my own example as a case study. First and foremost, my late father believed in me before I could believe in myself. So, it already gave me the confidence and the wings to propel myself, even after past when, I was now not necessarily under his guidance any longer. So that's the first thing. And thankfully for me, I've worked in organizations that also allow us the opportunity or also have enabling policies that allow strategic development of all genders and all ages, right? And what that has done for me is that my early years drilling offshore Bonga for Shell, I drilled about 18 wells on that asset, right? And once upon a time, I would be the only woman on the rig, deep offshore of Nigeria. But that helped me build my capacity. So the capacity you see me have today is because a company invested in me, a company let me go offshore, believed in me, and allowed me to hone my resources, my competencies in the way that I'm utilizing it today. And so that's what we must do as a nation, in the sense that we must begin to build focused attention, not just on the policy direction, but strategically developing leadership talents, not just males, but females. It's now good to see that we come for these conferences now, and the panel is beginning to be diverse, as it is today. Kudos to the organizers. I think they deserve a round of applause for that, actually. Once upon a time, you probably would not see any female filed up, on the panel. So that's a good thing, and that's a good direction, because representation matters, right? When you see me do it, then my gender has the confidence to be able to say, if Rosario can do it, then I possibly can do it. And then you go with confidence in achieving that desire. So that's one angle to it as well. I talked about the community angle. I believe that from the point of view of what our traditional and cultural bias is towards the gender lens, it's important that we address strategic awareness at all levels, especially at the community levels, so that, especially for those who are underserved or disadvantaged from a point of view of information, people in rural communities begin to understand that when they have a boy and a girl child, you don't say, okay, the girl child is going to be married off anyways, so I invest more in my boy child. So it's important that even at the community, we start to ensure that they make education accessible from a government perspective at all levels, so that people are given the foundational basis to, breed their wings and fly. And so that's where the awareness training comes on, education comes on, scholarships come in. A lot of our companies, filed in here. Personally, I work for Tenaris, and every year we run an annual scholarship that floats at all levels, not just at the tertiary level, but also at the primary level, the secondary level, to ensure that we continue to funnel out talents that potentially can we can enrich the pipeline of the energy industry, for a talent pipeline of the energy industry. So it's critical that we have these views around creating the awareness, enabling the environment, and developing the leadership or whatever technical competencies that we require for the future without losing sight of age. There's something that affects us now in the energy, in the industry. We have a cycle. We've suffered a cycle in the past few years where we've seen COVID, we've seen the impact of the Russia and Ukraine war, and we're at that point where we're trying to stabilize our nation and also go ahead to, just maximize or optimize our oil resource. So what that has done for the industry is that there is a gap. There's a gap from an age perspective. So you have certain age lines who are currently workforce population in the industry, but there's a gap because there's not been hiring, because there's been very limited activity, right? So it's important that the industry also has a view that as the industry is impacted by the macro dynamics of the economy, we don't lose sight of the fact that we need to create a pipeline of talent for today, for tomorrow, and for the future. This is my view on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosario. So I mean, you laid it out. We lose if we don't include the others that don't typically fit into that paradigm. And you open up another thing. It's a nice segue about the age gap, and maybe to some extent the competency gap. And I want to, so Michelle, I'm going to come to you because I want you to speak before the boys, right? So a few things. We talked about having a lot of resources in Nigeria, right? And you've been here long enough in your career several times to be able to speak to that. But then we also talking about being able to bring, well, first of all, maybe attracting the brightest minds to fit that, to fill that gap, and also still leverage the diversity side of it. How do you see it? I actually want your personal perspective before you go into company perspective, and I also like to know what are you doing to develop that human capacity part of your toolkit.
Okay, there's a lot in there. All right, so I'll start with my personal perspective. This is my second time in Nigeria. Similar to you, I have worked offshore. I spent 10 years of my career rotating offshore. And it's funny, the last time I was in Nigeria from 2012 to 2017, I ended as the offshore installation manager on Igbami. And for Chevron, was our largest FPSO. And I ran it, and I was the only female on board. Not only that, but when I would come in for crew change meetings, the leadership team that I got to be part of were all men. I come back now, right? I'm back. This is my second time through. I've been here for a little over a year, and it's changed. There has been a tangible change. On our leadership team at the highest level within Chevron in Nigeria, 50% women on our leadership team. When I look at my organization, my general manager of operations is a woman. My general manager of NOJV and projects is a woman. My FE manager is a woman. My newest ops superintendent offshore on Egbami is a woman. And that's just in the space of leaving from 2017 to coming back now. So you're talking 7 years? That's a pretty hefty change in 7 years, and it was amazing to come back into. And the reason I think that's so amazing is yes, I've got a lot of passion about gender diversity. As you said, if I don't talk about it, then I'm not doing my gender a service. At the same time, it's about the ideas. When you look about the challenges that are going to come into the industry over this next decade, we're talking about them here. We're talking about the energy mix. We're talking about lower carbon. We're talking about how do we partner better with the government to make these things a reality. We talk about, with the gas, the challenges on the infrastructure challenges. I look at Chevron's history, and I'm going to go back a little bit in our gas side. We've got a really strong history here. When I look at gas, we've got our Escravos gas plant, our Escravos gas to liquids plant. We've got the West Africa gas pipeline. We've put out 97% of our flares from 2013 to 2023. Here's the thing, that only got us here. We've seen investment across the country decline over COVID. We need to get out of this. And we are an aging workforce. I'm not going to say I'm old. You called us old. I am not old.
No, I'm the old one.
But we are an aging workforce. We need every idea to figure out how do you move from where we are now to where we need to go. We need infrastructure investment. We need partnership with the government. We need investment. We need to move our gas strategy from the value chain we have now to how do we make not only our domestic gas commitments, focusing on the power sector and agricultural sectors, but we may need to make it broader. We need to figure out how we can make Nigeria an export location for gas. We have the resources here. This is a wealth of resources. And we're not going to do it if we're not getting everybody's ideas. This is not going to take the standard set of ideas that got us here today. You're going to need everybody. I want the women. I want the young folks who, let's be honest, probably know more about AI and some of the upcoming technology that we learned. I need an open mindset. I need people open to ideas. And the only way that you get that is if you've got a culture in your company that fosters an open mindset. And it's got to foster it for everybody. And so I can say, from a company perspective, because you were going to get that too, Chevron firmly believes in diversity and inclusion. We are going to start hiring again. We have recognized the same gap that you have, and we haven't been hiring recently. That's about to change. And with that is going to come an entire learning and development program for how you onboard. And diversity and inclusion is going to be part of that. It has to be, because we need all the ideas, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of background. And I think you're going to need that in order to be successful.
Very good. Very, very good. Well done. Well covered. No, I was just reflecting on what you said about we're going to hire again, and diversity and inclusion will have to be part of it, which kind of it underscores the need to do things differently when it comes to human resources, and I'm hoping all the leaders here are paying attention to that. If what we are seeing comes through, our industry is going to grow, right? There's a cautious optimism, and when it does, we need to do things right, and part of it is onboarding people, and onboarding people, we need to add that DEI concept to it, not just because it's a fancy thing to do or it's expected, but simply because it makes sense. You mentioned a point now, I'm trying not to speak too much, but a good point about the younger kids. The younger people are the ones that understand what AI is about and the blockchain, and that is the future technology that we all have to adopt or we just go obsolete. And Michelle, just to be clear on this panel, I'm the only old one. So
good.
Let's be very, let's be very. Who's clapping about me being old? It's not like I like it. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go to you, Bambo. Pretty much everything discussed. Oh, hold on. I want you to address DEI from your standpoint. Again, I want your personal perspective, and I want you to also discuss what you're doing to achieve that. Just if I go back, Michelle, you said something about a change between 7 years, right? Within 7 years. I want to guess that change didn't happen because of work in 7 years. It happened because of work that probably started before that 7 years. That's just my guess, because that's my experience. So I want to hear from your standpoint what you're doing, what you would recommend to other leaders that are sitting down here.
Okay, thank you for that. Putting me in a slightly difficult position. I can't start my own statement by saying that I want to represent my gender. And so I have to, but I mean, it's really inspiring. I like that Rosario started it off, and what I got from her is that she was empowered by an IOC, and now she's able to inspire others. And that's really the path that we want to be on. And Michelle was also able to illustrate how Nigeria has changed in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. For us at Oando, we've always been about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said earlier that we look at everything as an opportunity. How can we take advantage of this situation? And in looking at the problems, I mean, we're in Nigeria, so the numbers are there. We have, I think, the largest number of out-of-school children. I trained as an engineer, and in my engineering class, there were very few women that graduated in my class. Of course, that's a while ago. But what we need to do and what we chose to do is to be very deliberate. The government has its role in terms of getting people into school, getting children into school, like especially the girl child into school. However, we have the Oando Foundation that focuses on education. We adopt schools, we train teachers, we build infrastructure, we partner with international organizations to make sure this is done. So that pipeline has to start from there. You can't, it's more difficult, even if a company wants to be deliberate and say, I'm going to hire 50% of women, if you can't find that number of qualified women in the technical field, STEM. We need to ensure that women get into STEM, girl children get into STEM, get interested, so that at the time of recruitment, you are able to compete on an even platform. What have we done? There's also an interesting form of diversity that we practice at Oando, which is a diversity of ideas. So we don't recruit Nigerians only in Nigeria. We like to say that we will look for Nigerians wherever they may be, because we look at it as an opportunity. Everywhere you go, you find Nigerians that are excelling outside of Nigeria. Most of these people are happy to come back home, given the right circumstances and environment. So how can we create an environment to bring these people back home so that we can have a greater diversity of ideas? A lot of the problems we have may seem simple until you're actually facing the problem. Quite a lot of them are complex. And we have seen that the cookie cutter approach doesn't work here. We need a diversity of ideas. Come to us with global world-class ideas. Let us blend that in with indigenous ideas from people that are in this environment and know the unique challenges that we face, such that your investment pays off. We've seen a lot of investment not pay off. There are schools that have been built in the Niger Delta that are empty, brand new schools, because we later found out that that may not be the way, that who wants to live there? Would the best teachers want to live where you've built the schools? So how about training the actual people that will teach the doctors, the teachers from that community such that it's already home. They just need the skills, not bringing in people and building brick and mortar. So those are the kind of things that we've looked at, we've recruited, we continue to recruit. Our gender mix is roughly 50-50. At the lower levels, it's more than 50-50. At the management exec levels, it's 50-50 because we've been deliberate about it, and we continue to be deliberate about diversity, equity, and inclusion at Oando.
Thank you very much, Wambo. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's you now, Mwiwa. I'm going to give you a free rein to just, give us your perspective and what you think we should be doing differently, or continue to do.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to start with that. You are pretty young.
Really?
You look quite young.
Thanks. Thank you.
And, to the person that applauded you, we forgive you. Our moderator is pretty young. Next up is the red card theory. If you leave your house in the morning, head into your office, and you unconsciously wouldn't notice any red car on the road. You would notice the black, you would notice the white, but you wouldn't notice the red car. And this is how we miss. I have to lean that. Apologies. This is how we miss opportunities and identify the benefits of those opportunities. When we lose the right talent, when we lose the right creative mind, we don't get to harness the ROIs from them. So from my perspective, at ICOSH, even at tertiary level, we did a couple of sponsorship around our communities, and maybe I'll borrow a cue from Rosario. We go down to the kindergartens if that's possible, and start from there. We need to foster a proper workplace culture. We need to learn how to transfer knowledge from the aging workforce to the young ones. We need to also support in terms of innovation. We need to support in terms of innovation. We need to job shadow. We need to allow the young generation to learn, be mentored by the aging staffs of every company. She rightly said it, IOC trained her, IOC trained me, and IOC has trained her too. So these are cultures that we grew up with. These are cultures that the companies that trained us allowed us to freely operate, freely learn, and they looked at us and said, oh, these guys have the right bright mindset. Invest more on them. And 50-50 exec level didn't start yesterday. In fact, when we are having our meetings at ICOSH and I looked at my people, 70% women, 30% men, I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on here? And it's a thing of joy for me to see that the girl power approach is out there. Everyone wants to support this drive. Everyone wants to support this motion. We don't just want to sit back and say, oh, then again, debate, girls. No, let's go to the field. Let's go to the rural areas. Nigeria's urbanization is on the large scale. But if we leave the people in the villages, in the rural areas, those who are unconnected, there are communities in Nigeria that don't have power. Do you believe?
Oh, yeah. That's true.
So how do they learn girl power? So we need to take the ministry there. We need to go and preach there. And again, from the aging workforce, please, I'd like to plead, documentation is important. Very, very crucial. We can't just train them. We can't just lead on and not properly document what was transferred or the knowledge we've gathered over 30, 35, 40 years and transfer it to these young ones. So for me, from my perspective, the sphere of knowledge is on different levels, and we need to continue to invest in these people. We need to continue to invest. Like you rightly said, AI is taking every part of the world. AI is one of the best things that has happened to us. And if you do not have an open mindset, if you're not willing to learn, I have a very, very famous adage: unlearn, relearn, and iterate. Continue to improve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mwa. So just for the record, you're my favorite panelist, because you said I'm not too old. Thank you. So I want to just maybe rehash something that I think is very important and make sure, because it wasn't part of my thought process. And you mentioned, you started with it, and you also mentioned, pretty much everybody mentioned it, which is the community. And I want to say it in a way, maybe towards the audience, that we all need to remember to make that part of our planning. And I say that because they're quite, and we have to be deliberate about that. Right? And we need to understand that dealing and developing our community, developing people in our community, from the human capacity and maybe even vendor and entrepreneur side of it, we have to adopt a slightly different approach. I mean, you mentioned that there are communities that does not have power. It shouldn't be, but that's where we are today. There are. So if I'm going to integrate a child that grew up in Surulere in Lagos and a child that grew up in a community that does not have power, if I'm going to integrate them into my workforce, I need to think differently. Another part of it is we need to, because I've talked to a lot of peers in the industry, and they complain about inability to get quality talent pool out of their immediate community. It is true, it's a challenge. But one of the things I found out lately is sometimes you have to really go in there. But more importantly, we probably have to identify these talents very early in their growth path, right? Again, the child that grew up in Surulere has everything he needs, well, not everything, but much higher access to things that they need to develop into a potential Chevron or ICOSH or Tenaris or Oando workforce. But there are a lot of people falling by the wayside because they did not get it. So I think we all need to kind of rethink what we do when it comes to developing our community. All right, so with that said, I want to go into, so I'll take mentorship out of what I just said, because mentorship is important. So when I said identify, it means, find a way to get them and then give them access to some kind of mentorship, some kind of leadership, some kind of steer. But if I take that out, and I'm going to start with you, Michelle, because you're sitting farthest, I want to share your thoughts on what it takes to develop a leader.
Leadership for me in this industry, it's got to start with a foundational knowledge of the industry. I do find that people want to come in and they want to be CEO, right? I did 10 years rotating offshore. I'm not saying everyone's got to do 10 years rotating offshore, but I think it does take a fundamental knowledge of our industry. And that could be any different function. That could be a petrotech function. That could be chemical engineering. That could be operations and maintenance. A good leader knows the business. And so it starts with that functional foundation of the business. It also requires a commercial knowledge of the business. So much of what we do, we can solve the technical challenges. But a lot of what we do is partnership. It's commercial terms. It's partnering with the federal government. It's partnering with each other. It's partnering with service providers. It's understanding terms and conditions and how to get business done. Because ultimately, you need to make returns, right? I wish we were all altruistic, but the truth is, we are here to make returns on our investment. And a good leader has to understand how to do that. So they have to start with the foundational knowledge, They have to build on that with the commercial knowledge on how they're going to get a return from the technical work. And then there's the people side. And I think historically we haven't focused as much on the people side. We looked at it as soft skills. They're not soft skills. They're actually the hard skills. You can go to school and learn the hard skills. You can get the technical stuff. Nobody teaches you how to be a good leader. And that is empathy. That is being open to ideas. It's being open to feedback. It's being open to change. It's learning how, when something like a new technology like AI comes to be, you can't just sit back and say, no, 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 I've got my 20 years of technical background, we didn't use AI. If we were still there, geologists would still be using colored pencils to color in logs. That's the stuff that it takes to be a good leader. So to me, it's a component of all three. It's a technical foundation. It's understanding commercial and business and how you can get a return from that technical foundation. And it's got to include the people stuff, the change, the empathy. How do you grow other leaders? That is the one that is probably most often missing because it's the one that is hardest to train.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That's quite insightful. Thank you. And again, I'll put everybody on the spot. So I'm going to go next to you. What would you say to a young mentee that comes to you, and how would you develop? What would they focus on to become leaders and come up to where you are?
Again, leadership is not that no one trains to become a leader. No one goes to school, even though we have most of our universities across the world offering courses like leadership and mentorship, leadership and style, leadership and behavioral science, blah, 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 blah. But I honestly believe that if you're not born a leader, it will be difficult to train and identify another leader. We should be able to see leaders in whoever we are mentoring. Then along the line, we can identify the strengths, identify where this is applicable, and drive one thing, open-mindedness. This is the first lesson. Be open to learn, be open to change, be willing and be intentional about learning. It is interesting to know that I was trained in a different field entirely, but I got into the office, I packed the certificate aside, and I was trained in another field entirely. And that is shaping my mind, shaping who I have become today and who I am becoming. And by extension, I am equally transferring those knowledge. Most of the leaders around the world, even Rosario here, I learned some things from her last year. She wouldn't believe it. It's being able to learn, understand your errors as a leader, identify it, apologize when you're wrong. Mm. If you have an MD or a chairman who doesn't apologize, then it's a bit of a problem. Apologize when you're wrong. If you yell in public, apologize in public. Don't apologize in private. Do you understand? So these are the things we need to teach the young ones. Be empathetic, be kind. Soft words like thank you. Characters like opening the door for your fellow colleagues could take you up there. So we should be able to foster an environment where there is a culture of open-mindedness. Be open, and we should be sincere about it. We don't just talk about it, practice it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, a good point about leaders are born. Yeah, I don't know, but I still think everybody have it in them. It's easier for some than others, but yeah, we all do. But a good point about being vulnerable, being open to being vulnerable. How do you say it? Not being afraid of being vulnerable around your people, right? I mean, and then the empathy side of it. So this is a good point as well. Rosario, what would you say to the mentee?
I'm sure I have a few mentees sitting here. But okay, it's an interesting perspective around leadership. I mostly align as well with my first two speakers. I would call what Michelle mentioned around foundation, character building. I think it starts at the foundation, building the character of the person. And this is why earlier on I said at Tenaris, for instance, we start at all levels to ensure that the kind of education that is availed to our communities are in such a way that, you kind of raise the bar one step, for them to be equitable. Because yes, for us in this room, for most of us in this room, we probably can afford sending our children to very good private schools afterwards, send them abroad, and all those fancy things. And sometimes when they go off, they never want to come back anyways. So we still need to continue to develop a workforce, right? So for me, the education that we require today, to build character is not just focused on academics. It's focused on a well-rounded person, a well-rounded human that combines confidence, competence, and a lot about willpower, the will to just continue to thrive, right? Yes, someone in the panel, I can't recall if it was Bambo or Muyiwa, who mentioned that, a lot of times we see comments coming from, we can't find people, even from the communities, we can't find the right fit. But that's because we have not taken the step, and that was the point Bambo was trying to make, right? And so for me, at that foundational level, we need to focus on ensuring that the right character of the child is formed. Once that is formed, next level is focus on building your technical competencies in whatever profession it is. Technical competencies, it could be in energy, it could be in banking, it could be in the financial world. There's a wide variety of industries or segments that you can hone your skills. While you're focusing on those technical competencies, it's important to put a view on competencies that allow you to be versatile, what we call transferable skills. So I always also tell my mentees to focus on building transferable skills and being able to identify them. Recently, someone sent me a CV. He said he was looking for a job, and he sent me a CV, and I looked at his CV, and I was like, I was not the recruiter, but I already looked at his CV, and I could tell that it wouldn't fly. So I looked at it and said, look, this won't fly. Because he had listed all the job roles that he had done, but I couldn't really feel from his CV what skills he possesses to be able to do the job. So I gave him that advice and told him to go and sit down and do a bit of reflection on his journey so far, identify his technical competencies as well as his, what you have called commercial and other softer competencies that allow you to be versatile. And when he did that, he came back, put the CV through the system, and he got the job. So that's what makes the difference. So it's important that we have this view as we build our leadership competencies to first build a very solid character base, build a solid technical base, and then you top that up with a solid, let's say, commercial soft base that allows you to be empathetic, that allows you to be confident, that allows you to be, all round being able to solve problems. Because at the end of the day, we need to, the world requires problem-solving abilities. We don't require talk shop. We're here talking. But if we leave this place and we don't roll our sleeves or roll up our sleeves and get the job done, then it would never happen. So a good leader as well would have that ability to be able to execute or have an execution bias that allows you to add or combine all these competencies to drive and solve real-life problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosario.
Right.
Your turn.
Well, wow. Thanks, Rosario, for that. I really enjoyed her perspective. And I'd like to narrow the question a little bit in terms of what does it take to be a good leader in Nigeria, because it's different. It's different, or it's more. I'll start from what Michelle, I really like the foundation she laid. You require that industry knowledge. It's the price of admission. The education, the industry knowledge is the price of admission. You've come to NOG, you have a badge, but you could just sit in the lunchroom and miss everything. So it's just a price of admission. It doesn't make you successful. What do we need to be a leader in Nigeria? Not even just in our industry. You need a vision. By vision, I mean you need to be able to visualize the end state. What do we want to be? What do we want to accomplish? Do we want to be like Saudi Arabia in 20 years? Do we want to be like Dubai? Or for those who watch a lot of movies, do we want to be like Wakanda? But we have to have an end state. I always like to say, never confuse a line of sight to a straight line. So, step one, have an end state, line of sight. This is where I want to be. But then also realize it's not going to be a straight line. There are so many things that you have to do along the way to get there. And that's where tenacity comes in. I really believe tenacity is one of Nigerians' innate superpowers. It's like a 6th or 7th sense for us, to the point that people make things difficult for you just to check if you're a Nigerian. If you give up, instead of asking for your passport, just make things difficult for him. If he gives up, he's not a Nigerian. So the tenacity is required. You have to be able to keep at it. And by doing that, that means you are focusing on where you want to be. There's a question you asked earlier, or maybe it was a statement about the challenge of maybe you are recruiting someone who grew up in Surulere and had power, etc. And then you are recruiting somebody else who grew up in a part of Nigeria and has never had power. But guess what? They're at the same place now. That's what I was referring to as a diversity of ideas. They've had different challenges, and if they never meet, how do you even solve the unique problems that we have? It's the same Nigeria. So being able to meet and grow together, that's how we build our culture. Nigeria has been producing oil for a long time. I believe the special advisor to the president said over 70 years we've been producing oil. It's time for a second, third generation. It's beautiful that we spoke about AI, and you're not really going to say, I believe it was Michelle that said, you're not going to say you know AI more than the young people of today. It's the same thing. I don't believe, and I'm going to just go right and say it, I don't believe that the IOCs are in a position to say they know exploration and production, at least in onshore, more than the indigenous companies today. We face different challenges. We've learned, and now it's time to grow. There's a lot of, as we all know, indigenization going on. It's not by accident. It's part of our life cycle. So now when it's in our hands, what is our end state? What do we want to accomplish or achieve? And how do we want to ensure that there's a continuum to the next generation? Those are the things we look at. We have, I'm glad we spoke about, IOCs training Nigerians and giving them the opportunity. The indigenous companies do it now. We personally, or well, not personally, the company, but we all take ownership in Oando. We like to think, I believe we're a family. We have an Oando Graduate Accelerated Program. We bring together all these people. It's a diversity of ideas, diversity of people. You stay with us for 2 years. You are thrown into the deep end. We have a few in the audience with us here. And we believe that that is how you train leadership. The first thing is you must be a leader yourself. You cannot be a follower and you're trying to train leaders. They must be able to look up to you. You must be able to inspire, and you must be able to show them a vision, knowing that you will not always be there, such that they can take up that mantle with their new ideas, which you cannot have. Your education, your exposure is different. It's a dynamic environment. 10 years ago, the idea of remote work was implausible. Now we were forced into it by COVID. But guess what? In some traditional work environments, as soon as we all return to the office, a lot of companies don't look at this remote work as an advantage. Now, well, some people are trying to phase it out. Everybody must be in the office, not realizing that we may have just acquired a new skill. Young people don't think like that. It allows them to have more of an open mind, and really, they're the majority. Nigeria is a young country. So we cannot continue to have, the tail wag the dog. They will lead eventually, whether you give them the skills or not. So it's in everyone's best interest, at least in our space. Thank you so much.
I've been told I have 5 more minutes now. Right? Is that 5 more? Okay. All right. I would like to kind of throw this out to the audience. Maybe we can take 2 questions. Please ask questions. Thank you. Very quickly.
The way that hand went up is like the question has been boiling in your heart. It's all right. Bro, help me, please.
I'm going to try to narrow down my questions. I'll take us back a notch. My name is Wale.
Please, can I remove the S?
I'll take it down to just 1.
Thank you very much.
Good. My question, I'm going to take us back a notch. My name is Wale. I came all the way from the US for this to see how this environment is and what I can bring in here. You mentioned something about diversity. Back at home, pardon me to call the US my home. I've lived there about 17 years. Diversity is streamlined to white, black, man, or woman. In Nigeria, we have multiple ethnicities, we have multiple languages from different backgrounds. Based on what you guys have spoken about, you've talked about statistics around men and women, educational, industrial knowledge.
Can we get to the question?
What are we doing about the different ethnic groups? We have 3 major languages. Are we bringing that into our independent policies and ensuring that we extend diversity into those ethnic groups? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please help me. You have 1 final question. Okay, diversity. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. If there's a woman, we'll take the woman, yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Sam. Question for Michelle. Nigeria is, we know, we are known for many things. Poverty capital of the world. But we are also the energy deficit capital of the world. My question is, how can we solve this conundrum of being so rich in resources, one of the largest gas reserves in the world, a big player in oil from the OPEC perspective, and yet we don't have energy? What's the issue from your perspective, and how can this issue be solved? Thanks.
All right. We have 1 more?
Yeah, the lady. Let's take the lady, and that's it.
Okay, all right.
Please help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really like when I hear people talk about diversity, because I'm the secretary of diversity group with the Nigerian Gas Association. My question is, every time we go for these energy events, we hear diversity, diversity, diversity. And we hear people talk about, oh, we're bringing inclusion, women are taking center stage now. But I have not really seen the practical thing being done. It's been a lot of talk, but we've not seen the work. So I just want to ask, apart from people saying, oh, in my organization now we may have 20% women sit on the board, my question is, what are we doing to encourage the young ones, the young girls in school? What exactly are we practically doing to tell them, look, this industry is not just open to the male gender, but to the women? What are we doing to guide them, to mentor them, to tell them, take these STEM courses and come up? And what are the other ways that we can collaborate to really, really infuse inclusion of women in the energy sector? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that it? Can we...
quickly answer.
All right, good. Michelle, I'll let you take the energy gap. The energy sufficiency question. I don't know that, man.
You've asked the multi-billion-dollar question, right? That is the multi-billion-dollar question. There are the reserves. There are the people. I believe there's the investment. That's why we're here. We have people willing to invest money and technology into solving these challenges. I believe it's partnership. I don't think any one company, I don't think the federal government alone can build the energy security that this country needs. I think it's going to take a culture of collaboration, true collaboration, where we're all in it for the growth. Because there's too many barriers to growth. Yeah. And each of us is going to bring a different piece. We need the stability and security. We need the competent workforce that needs to come from the communities. We need the business partners that are bringing in the technology and the goods and services. We need both the independent producers and the IOCs to come together to tackle some of the challenges that come across the whole portfolio, from deep water to near shore to the energy transition. And I think we all want to make money, but we all need to come together to truly collaborate to make that happen. I believe that we can make the pie bigger. I think there's a lot of folks that are looking for their piece of the pie. We all want to make money. Like I said, we're not altruistic. We do want returns on our investment. But I think there's another view of that where we can actually make the pie bigger so that there is more for everyone, more for all of the companies. And I think that has to come from a true spirit of collaboration.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That's a very good answer. Thank you. So there are two diversity questions. One is specific to women, and the other one is specific to cultural diversity in our workforce. Rosario, I'll let you take the women diversity and what we're doing, and we'll come back to it.
Okay, thanks. That was a very interesting question. I actually offered to take this because I think that when you're talking about practicality, there are many ways to identify practicality. I'll mention two things just to support and probably help you see a different perspective to this comment or to your question. The first perspective is, for me, I use myself as an example. I became the first female managing director of Tenaris in Nigeria after over 30 years of having experts pull that role. So if this is not practicality enough, I don't know what that practicality would look like, beyond this. Again, for me, I became the first female chairperson of the Petroleum Contractors Trade Section, which I currently lead. And I drive an army of 7 men, tire inclusive, So this is practical enough, right? Just to demonstrate that just from our own little organization, these are actions to make sure you demonstrate that you are diverse or you have the view of increasing diversity in your workforces. Imagine the quantum effect around all the organizations that sit here. Michelle has given the example. She's sitting here as well as a female with 50% representation. That tells you that there's been concerted efforts, there's been practical efforts towards addressing the diversity gap. Now, there's a second angle to it, as I said. The second angle to this is, yes, what's happening to the funnel, the young ones coming afterwards. Again, for many organizations, we promote a culture of STEM-focused programs where we deploy at scale, at all levels. I'm sure every organization seated here, or most organizations who are forward-thinking, have STEM-focused programs to spark STEM curiosity at an early age and ensure that that funnel is building towards, the pipeline of the future. As an example, I also sit on the board of the Women in Energy Network. I hope you're a member. If you're not a member, get registered today, because the idea around solving the diversity challenge is not for us, it's for all of us. So you have to be practical around joining networks that allow you contribute your own quota towards addressing the issue of diversity. And in WIN, as the academic director, I'm very aware that we have a Supernova program. The Supernova program is created or was created to address the specific gap of creating a pipeline of young talent, especially female, focused on STEM, so that for the future of the industry, we already have, hopefully, as we continue that program, we continue to build a strong workforce or a strong talent pool of STEM-focused females that can take on the future of the energy industry. I hope this answers from a practicality perspective, but this is what must be done. And please join us in that view of walking the industry through building the pipeline that we require. Now to cultural diversity. Ooh. Oh, wow. Okay. Cultural diversity is important, right? I agree with you that we need to look at, we don't need to look at only the D&I lens, the gender lens or the age lens. We need to look, especially for a country such as Nigeria, where we are divided by political lines, we are divided by tribal lines, and we are divided by religious lines. It's important that in hiring processes, we exclude, in fact, from the hiring process, it's important that you do blind recruitment in such a way that every form of bias is taken away, right? And so when you're coming to the point where you're recruiting a talent, it's because that talent is competent enough, right? And cuts across, you know, any particular tribe, religion, or background, you know, or ethnicity. This is generally what most companies are adopting today. From the government's perspective as well, I think that that's what federal character represents, in the form of ensuring that, you know, there is representation across all the 6 geopolitical zones. I don't know how well that is advancing. I can't speak into that, but I think that there's a clear sense of intent around that direction as well. I hope this answers your question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Not a whole lot. Okay, all right. Well, okay, I guess I'm going to have to round it up. Bambo, we'll get to talk about this over there. But no, thank you, everyone. Again, thanks for coming so early to listen to us. It's been an enriching, at least for me, and I hope it is for you. It's been an enriching panel discussion. I've learned quite a lot of things here. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to these people. I have all their phone numbers, so you can always get it from me. Thank you one more time, and that'll be it for us.